So
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Morning, everybody. It's Tony here with Rebel Financial. Thank you for joining us again for our weekly podcast. Today's guest from the Compost Exchange is Ray Leard. Ray, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the Compost Exchange has to do with neighborhood recycling of compost, and that's what we're going to talk about. So before we get into that, I want just a little bit about you. Tell us because you are from Columbus. You moved
Yep.
away for a little bit. You're back. So tell us, what brought you on this journey? How did you get into this?
I moved to Athens, Ohio in 2007, and I had a food company for 30 years and moved back from Norfolk, Virginia, trying to grow it some more in Athens, Ohio. So I built a big building, 12,000 square foot warehouse, 7 acres of land. And along the way, between 2007 and 2010 or so, kept hearing about composting at the farmer's market, which is very vibrant down there, and just other individuals. And so I kept questioning, why doesn't somebody do it? And they, well, nobody wants to risk the money. And so I said, it's something that's really needed. So I did it. And I opened a Class 2 Ohio EPA licensed facility down there next to my big building. It was about this compost thing was about 7,000 square feet. And worked out real well. Had a booth at the farmer's market. The guy was crazy. They're going to pay you to bring their food scraps. And I said, yeah, it worked out really great. And so in 2014 or thereabouts, I decided to end the run with the food business. Decided to sell the whole thing. The local recycling people that was done by the solid waste district. They ran the recycling, a nonprofit. They bought the whole thing, and they actually kept the food waste recycling part of it, and now they do everything down there. So, but anyway, in 2016, I came back to Columbus, opened 3 drop-off booths like I'd done at the Athens Farmers Market, Worthington, Granville, and Newark, and that worked out well. And at the same time, I met 2 guys that I hadn't seen in a couple of years, and they were they're just starting up a thing called Innovative Organics Recycling. And I decided to become partners with them. And so the last 3 years, I've been helping to grow that business. And back in May this year, I decided that I had done what I should do there, and they were on their way. And I decided to leave Innovative Organics Recycling and go back to the Compost Exchange, which I had done all the time on the weekends with these drop-off booths. So I was working 7 days a week. It was crazy. And so I decided to go back and just do residential food scrap recycling. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Okay. So let's come back a little bit because I think most people want to do what's good and right for the environment and such, but we don't for a number of reasons. So let's talk about why composting is important. When we're not composting, what is the damage?
Well, like last year in just this county, let alone the country, but in this county last year, 150,000 tons with a T of food scraps went to the landfill. Okay, with all the work that we did at Innovative Organics the last 3 years, last year we recycled and diverted only 2,000 tons. So there's a lot to do, and the reason why those materials shouldn't go to the landfill is that the landfill materials they're put in there and then they're just covered up, which means there's no air. And to produce a product or end result that is beneficial to air, water, and soil, okay, things that we all need, those materials need to go, they need to stay aerobic or have oxygen in and amongst the materials. But it goes anaerobic in a landfill, and they break down, but they break down differently, and they create methane. Methane is a atmospheric gas. It's 25 times worse than CO2.
Worse for the environment.
For the global warming thing that some people dispute, but that's reality. It's 25 times worse than CO2. Okay, and so plus the other benefits of better soil, better water. There's no when you use compost, you don't need fertilizers. There's no runoff into Lake Erie, that type of thing.
Right.
All right, and a lot of benefits. Local jobs. And I always tell people this one thing is that food scrap recycling is created. I call it a locally produced natural resource, because when you're in your kitchen and you're doing that salad or making whatever you're making, and you have something that's the outer, maybe it's an apple core, banana peel, and you are right there, and you can either trash it or compost it or start that process of recycling that food. So you create that natural resource at that very moment. And I think that people realize, gee, yeah, that's what we're doing or not doing. You're also at that time, you can put it in the landfill and you're doing that. Methane, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or do something, and that's all the difference there is. When I was with Innovative Organics, I was the guy in charge of the commercial accounts, and I would go and you have that opportunity right there in the kitchen, boom or boom, and that's because you put it somewhere. It doesn't. Those 150,000 tons, they don't get there magically.
Right.
We do it one peel at a time every day, all of us.
Yeah.
And so, how do you fix that? Simply put it here and get used to taking that container to the right place. Yeah. And that's from that moment, that's pretty easy to kind of, okay, I can do that. Most people, they can do that.
Right, that make it easy. So the numbers you said, we put about 150 tons, and you
150,000 tons.
150,000 tons, right.
Right.
And was it 2,000 tons?
We did 2,000 tons.
That's not a bad start. I mean,
no, it's not.
But
it's just again, not a whole lot. All the effort that we expended to get there. And but that's the mission. That's you might ask, well, aren't you tired, Ray? No, man, because it's a mission thing that this needs done. It isn't that hard to do if you have the right infrastructure. If people understand why they should, and then they're quick at the farmers markets, right?
Right.
They're quick to when they walk up to the booth that we have there, and they'll quick to say, well, okay, now that I understand why I should. You got to make it easy. You got to make it convenient, and you got to make it affordable. And we've already done that. Right. So as long as you have this system, this infrastructure to receive it, and then the system that gets people to realize this is not real hard.
Right.
And because they think it is.
Right.
They think it's going to smell, and it doesn't if you do it right.
Yeah.
And so it's just about having the right system.
You had mentioned too, one of the benefits. It's great that people do compost in their backyard,
sure.
But there's drawbacks to that, right? Let's talk about that.
And in many cases, they don't have enough carbon. A good compost pile needs carbon, nitrogen. Carbon comes from wood chips or brown material. Nitrogen comes from the food. Airspace or porosity in the pile, right? So it can't be compact. It's got to have. That's where the chips or leaves come in because they create air pockets. Mm-hmm. In there, at least initially. And you need moisture. Moisture comes from, in many cases, just the food waste itself, or if it's a pile outside, it rains, right? And so as long as you have those four things in the right proportion, that thing will start cooking away. Mm-hmm. And so most people don't have enough carbon. Okay. All right? So that's one thing. The other thing that sometimes happens is they'll put proteins in the pile, which attract critters. So most websites that people go to, and they'll look up, well, what are the yeses and nos? Well, most will say, no meat, no fish, no chicken, because it attracts critters, right? So in a commercial facility like ours, the one in Organics that I was with, we have a big grinder, and so we take the material, we take compostable serviceware, the plates, the clamshells that many restaurants serve now, but there's no guarantee that they'll want it, but they serve that. It's really good intention, right? But the place like Innovative Organics, it does take clamshell serviceware that's made from plants. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Okay. But those are the main things that critters get in the mix, and people don't like that, and I don't blame them. Right. And then a lot of times the lack of enough carbon. Right. In the pile. So getting the mix right. Yeah. Because I was always taught, well, you don't want to put meat in there, but the reality is you don't want to do that, as I learned, because you don't want the animals coming around, and that's what's going to do that. Right. So you have a list on the website, right? So if you go to, and we're not going to do that now, thecompostexchange.com, poke around there, and you will see a list on there of do's and don'ts of that. So let's talk about the back end of this. They give you the compost then. I know you use it. You're working with in some capacity innovative organic recycling. What happens once you've taken all this? Okay, so let's imagine like every weekend, which is true. I have about 5,000 pounds of food scraps I've collected at the 5 drop-off. So every week, every week. That much. Wintertime, summertime. Wow. People ask, because we're at farmers markets and they close, they'll ask, sometime like right about now when they walk up and they're considering it. what happened in the winter? And my reaction is, they leave and we stay. And they go, all winter? Yeah. And so we're out there all winter. And in reality, people come, even though we're by ourselves.
Right.
Because they get used to the habit. Right. Matter of fact, they start complaining if we even hint, or they, they're hoping, hey, you guys aren't leaving, are you? No, we're not. We stay all year. And so that's been real nice that the folks at these markets have allowed us to stay.
Yeah.
And we're Whole Foods on Lane Avenue on Sundays, and same thing. We're there all year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. No,
but so what happens after that is,
yeah.
So the material gets collected. I take it down to Still Innovative Organics, and it's in a building, and there's a concrete pad. And so just imagine I back the truck up, I unload the materials on the pad. That's a big pile of I get a chance to look at another side thing. I get a chance to look at all the stuff that people throw away. And so that gets another issue of preventing.
Right.
But let's get back to the story, which is the stuff is there. I then get in the skid steer, the big loader, bulldozer kind of thing, and that's called a skid steer. And I add the carbon to it, secret sauce recipe,
okay.
Right? And then I tumble it. Just imagine flipping that as material so that they get mixed together. And then usually there's a big pile already in the building, so I'll lay those materials across the face in layers.
Okay.
All right? Then I'll cover it with more carbon, and I drive away, and it doesn't smell if you do that correctly every time.
Okay.
It really doesn't.
Well, only because we have a prop. Let's talk about this. Is really what is going to help. You're going to put your compost in this before you deliver it to Ray, and this is what's going to help contain the smell and all those things. And by the way, so we have a recyclable.
Well, it's a compostable plant-based liner, and people sometimes think it's plastic, right? Because it looks like plastic bag.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's compostable. It's plant-based. So what happens? People will ask, well, what happens to the liner when it gets to the pile? Okay, so we have, like I said, 5,000 pounds. There's liners. There's the food scraps. They're being tumbled. It goes in the pile. I cover it up. If you were to go back in that pile in 2 weeks and kind of uncover that particular week's materials, you wouldn't find those liners. They melt. Okay. Matter of fact, on a really, really hot stretch of July, right, that we just went through, sometimes I lift those liners out of the bucket, because that's what happens. People bring the bucket with the liner into the drop-off centers. I take the lid off, take that liner out, put it into my container, a bigger one, and get them a new liner, and they'll walk away. Thank you very much. Okay, so sometimes in July, those liners are already starting to degrade. They're starting to melt.
Okay.
And there'll be holes, and if they've been there for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that the heat will start to melt the material.
Okay.
And so that's what happens. They literally melt away and they disappear.
Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah.
So then the compost is refined and.
Well, then it cooks. That's the system. We don't turn it in windrows. It's in the building, and so it's an ASP system, which means that there's forced air into the pile. That's where the oxygen comes from.
Okay.
And so say you have a pile that's, let's say, 15 feet wide, 50 feet deep, 8 feet high, 10 feet high. And then you fill that chamber, all right? In about 2 weeks, it'll start to drop. 30 days later, it's maybe 8 feet high. It was 10. That means that there's no porosity, no the airspace, because the critters are cooking away, right? It's 150 degrees in here, literally in 2 days.
In there, yeah.
After 2 days of the new stuff, 150 can temp it. They just start eating away. So what that means is that the stuff is starting to collapse on itself. Okay? So you have to flip it to the next chamber.
You have to get that air back.
Get it fluffed.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing you do at home. In your 3-compartment thing, your three bin system that people sometimes use, right, out of pallets. I have one at home myself. That's what happens when you fill that first chamber, and the technique is move to the second one. That fluffs it back up. That's what it's doing.
Well, growing up, even I'm from Chicago, right? So 35 years ago, my mother had purchased a tumbler.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why, I didn't know then why we would get the sawdust and things like that, but that's right. So it needs carbon, needs nitrogen, the oxygen and such like that. So, okay, so then we get to the end, and now it's composted.
Now it's cooked away. It's changed, evolved into something that's usable. For an EPA licensed facility, you have to get it labbed.
Okay.
Before anything leaves the site, it has to pass the labs.
Okay.
It's about a 4-page document, and there's a couple things, salmonella and another not very pleasant end result that might be there. That's what they really test for, is to make sure these two things aren't the parts per million are really low.
Yeah.
But once you pass, you can then make soil from it or sell it straight up, and that's how it works.
That's the whole, that's
the process,
right?
Yeah.
So at a minimum, there's an opportunity to go there and get some really good.
Oh yeah, and if
compost.
you're a member of the Compost Exchange, every time you renew your membership, you get a portion as a benefit free.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not it's not a huge amount, but it's people sometimes ask, do I get some back?
Right.
Yeah, you do. You renew and you get some. You get just ask for it, and we'll give you a 2-gallon bucket free.
Well, and what I want people to appreciate is how much goes into this and why there's a cost to it, right? I mean, it's a good thing for society, but there's a lot of work involved.
It's more of an art than a science, because people ask.
But there's labor and there's.
That's right. You have to manage it. You have to move it. You have to test it. You have to sort it. Sometimes, like with commercial accounts, they'll come with bottles and cans in that. People kind of aren't as unlike this system with the folks who belong to the Compost Exchange. People at restaurants have to be trained to understand why, what goes in where, and they have to be there at that moment when they're putting that plastic away, and sometimes they don't. Yeah. So that's really when we sort some of our accounts, we get 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of whole food sometimes. You have to sort it. Yeah. Make sure there's it's a labor intensive kind of entity. But
so on your side, I get they have the drop offs. Is that what there is right now? If they're going to do with the Compost Exchange,
so we have five drop off booths, mostly at the farmers markets on Saturday, one on Sunday at Whole Foods. Kind of in case you miss Saturday, you have Whole Foods to go to, which a lot of people do because I run that myself. Then we have a curbside system or program, in which like the drop-off is you come to us. Curbside is I'll come to you. It's right now it's on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and it's growing, and that's what people prefer is curbside.
Well,
and so and the trick with the curbside to really have people kind of like get on board with that is that if you form a team, it's a lot cheaper. Okay, to have me come to one spot and get 4 buckets versus 4 spots, bucket. So a lot of people are discovering that hey, if we can work together as a team, neighborhood team, then hey, maybe as a city, we'll get this thing knocked out. And honestly, I think it shouldn't take more than 5 years to have most of the city in a system that generates a lot of diversion away from the 150,000 tons that went to the landfill. It shouldn't be anything close to that in 5 years or less. Yeah. It's just a matter of getting people to realize why do it. It's the education factor, and I'm working with a group called Kids That Compost. Brand new group, brand new company, nonprofit, and they're getting kids to get involved with kind of signing up people to do curbside. I'm the guy that collects, and they go out and they get the kids to go out and sell it.
Kids That Compost.
Kids That Compost.
I told you I met you because my daughter dragged me to Whole Foods. Glenn wanted to get involved with this, so I'll have to make sure she knows about that. Let's one example along the lines of what we're talking. Bexley.
Okay.
So let's just talk about the success story there.
Oh, okay. Well, what was it? Again, I think it was 17. I went and I opened a booth on Thursdays, a drop-off booth at Bexley's Farmers Market. That's right. That was a year later. And Mayor Ben Kessler and I talked a couple times. He was interested. He's a real go-getter with this kind of environmental movement for the city of Bexley. He wants to be a leader. He wants Bexley to be known as a leadership kind of city with that kind of thing. So he was interested, and we talked and met with the city council and made a presentation, and they decided to do a pilot 2 years ago, November. This coming November, we launched that pilot for about 400 people, and they each got a bucket, and we were swapping buckets at that time. We didn't have the liner system in place yet, so we delivered the buckets and started collecting, and people liked it, and to go through that other example with the recycling people, one of the things that really made it successful, I think from their point of view, they really liked it, was that we would on purpose place the buckets in the same spot, perfectly placed every week, and they kind of noticed that because the other recyclers didn't. We were really crazy about the consistency. Mm-hmm. And as simple an idea as that is, I mean, how hard does it take to pick up the bucket where they put it, the resident, and put it in the same spot so they would know it was one, it was changed, it had been done, and two, it was neat, it was organized, and they weren't used to that.
With not a pile of compost lying
Yeah. We never had an issue with scraps that fell over, fell out, or dropped, whatever, and they discovered it, and they really liked the fact that we something as simple as it really is, that we cared enough to do that consistency every week. Mm-hmm. And so the city liked it, the mayor liked it, they voted to do the whole city last fall, so we went citywide in February this year. And initially 850 some signed on, and there's let me not forget that one issue. But, and now they have about 1,200, according to George Agnotti, who's the owner of Innovative Organics. He still does it, and they're growing it. And every month more people sign on, and as long as they're consistent, people will like it, and they'll get probably, of the 4,400 residents, they'll probably get maybe 2,000 eventually. Mm-hmm. But that's really the secret of it, is that of that success and this success with what we do, is that people who sign on, they're the ones that well, I've been doing 7 years, uncorking, taking the lid off buckets, right? Mm-hmm. Right? And in 7 years, I can still count this many fingers, the number of uncorking lids that doesn't belong there, comes out of my mouth. Okay. I mean, literally, the folks who do this, they're mentally there at that moment, right, when they have to decide that where does this go, where does that go. Right. I never have a problem, right, and that's really a testament to their mission, right, of an individual thinking, I don't make a difference. Well, what you do matters, yeah, and it's it does require that you mentally are there when you do it, but it isn't real hard if you commit. And that's why Bexley worked. That's why this works. That people, it's funny at the markets when people walk up and they'll ask you, "How's this work?" And I'll see somebody with a bucket coming, a member, and I'll say, "Hold on, just watch," and they kind of back off and they, listen to the interplay of what I say and what they do, and then I'll say, "Ask them, don't ask me." Ask, right. And they'll ask the member, "It's so easy." And sometimes I'll have somebody walk up who's a member. It's their first week of doing it, and I'm going, "This is great," because I get to ask them, "How'd it go?" And I know they're going to say, "Piece of cake." Right. Some people say, "Our trash is only this much now. It's like ridiculous." And that's the other thing that one of the benefits and why I do it is that in some cities, honestly, what's happened is that the trash, the real trash, what's left, gets picked up every 2 weeks now. Because there's so much less of it. Yeah. They're recycling their bottles and cans and so forth. They're recycling their food scraps. What's left? Hardly anything. So why come every week? Yeah. No, that's awesome. And that's what isn't really addressed. And people kind of, but that means that we have a contract with Rumpke or Waste Management and they won't like it and so on. Well, they have to adapt too. You're asking us to adapt. We really do because it's what we all should do. They need to adapt too. Yeah. And kind of, let's do this because it's just the right thing to do, and let's find a way to make a profit at doing what's the right thing to do. Right, and to employ people and because it does create more jobs doing this than it does doing the just trash. Right.
Okay, well listen, a couple things I'm going to mention. One is the bag that you talk it's called the EcoSafe, is that right?
That's the brand, yeah.
So ecosafebags.com if you want to look into that. The other thing is, if you are in a community, push the leaders of the community. Off screen, Ray and I talked about some of the.
Well, honestly, the key is to change policy. In the states in which this is working, they're working because they change policy at the top. And once policies change, you will, if you're a certain size, a commercial account, you will have to put your stuff over here that's recyclable, and you can't put it over there anymore. That type of policy change. 4 states in the East Coast. Of course, the crazy folks in California and Oregon and Washington, they're doing it. Denver, Colorado, Austin, Texas, and all the leaders, right? Minnesota people, right? But the policy change is key to getting this thing to get done faster, and that takes political will. But honestly, folks are ready for it. They really are.
Well, and soil is becoming a commodity that's dissipating here, going into our oceans. So, but anyway, well, listen, we appreciate you coming in, Ray.
Sure.
It was good talking to you. Good meeting you. So, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Please, if you think about it, subscribe to our YouTube channel if this interests you and you want to keep seeing these. But otherwise, have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Remember now, compost it.
Compost this whole week, yeah.